If Jesus really was the Messiah, that claim should not rest on tradition, emotion, or repetition. It should rest on evidence. So in this video, we're looking at the link between ancient prophecies written hundreds of years before Jesus and the specific claims made about his life in the New Testament. Not sermons, not assumptions, texts that exist, and whether they meaningfully converge on one person. Before we begin, two clarifications. First, not every prophecy is interpreted the same way. Some passages are explicit, others are debated. I will tell you which is which. Second, when the New Testament says something happened to fulfill Scripture, we will treat that honestly for what it is. A claim made by the authors, not a conclusion you are required to accept. Now let's begin. One of the clearest examples comes from Micah 5:2. It says the ruler of Israel would come from Bethlehem. The New Testament claims Jesus was born there. That matters because birthplace is not something an adult can later arrange. If the claim is true, it belongs to a category outside intentional control. Another major expectation was lineage. The Old Testament says the Messiah would come from the line of David. The Gospels explicitly present Jesus as a descendant of David. Lineage is not something a person chooses, it is inherited. Another well-known prophecy comes from Zechariah 9:9, which describes a king entering Jerusalem riding on a donkey. The Gospels connect this directly to Jesus. Now, this is where an important distinction needs to be made. Some prophecy fulfillments are things a person could intentionally act out. Riding into Jerusalem on a donkey is one example. If Jesus knew the text, he could choose to do that. That does not make it meaningless. But it does mean it should not be weighed the same way as events outside human control. Up to this point, someone could still argue coincidence. What comes next is harder to dismiss. Psalm 22 describes a figure surrounded by mockers and includes the line, "They divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing." The Gospel accounts describe Roman soldiers doing exactly that during Jesus' crucifixion. This is not something a man being executed controls. It is an external action carried out by others. Zechariah 12 also speaks of one who is pierced. The New Testament records Jesus being pierced during execution. Again, not an action under personal control. Then there is Isaiah 53. Written centuries before Jesus, it describes a figure who is rejected, afflicted, silent in suffering, compared to a lamb led to slaughter, and assigned a grave despite having done no violence. Christians see this as pointing to Jesus. Many Jewish interpreters read it differently. That disagreement matters, but it does not erase how closely the language matches how Jesus' suffering and death are later described. Isaiah 53 also does not end with death. It says the servant will see the light of life and prolong his days. That brings us to resurrection. Psalm 16 says God will not abandon his Holy One to the grave or allow him to see decay. In the book of Acts, this passage is explicitly applied to Jesus' resurrection. Jesus himself adds another layer by pointing to Jonah, saying that just as Jonah was in the fish for 3 days, the Son of Man would be in the heart of the earth and then emerge. This is not an Old Testament prophecy in the strict sense. It is Jesus interpreting earlier scripture as a sign of what would happen to him. Matthew also records that King Herod ordered the killing of male children in Bethlehem and connects this to a passage in Jeremiah about Rachel weeping for her children. Some scholars accept this account, others dispute it. Some critics object that this event is not mentioned by other ancient historians. But Bethlehem was a small village. If such an event occurred, the number of victims may have been small enough not to appear in surviving records. The point here is not to force agreement, but to show how the New Testament consistently frames Jesus' life through older scripture.